This is Kickass News. I'm Ben Mathis. Millions of people face legal problems every year. Take control of your rights with Legal Shield for help on a variety of legal issues such as preparing a will or fighting a speeding ticket. As a Legal Shield member, you'll pay an affordable monthly rate for access to an entire law firm instead of hefty hourly fees. Get the legal protection you deserve. Visit LegalShield.com and put a law firm in the palm of your hand today with Legal Shield. And now, on with the show. Hi, I'm Ben Mathis. Welcome to Kick-Ass News. Everyone loves an underdog, and that's just one of the reasons TV audiences have taken to the Amazon series Goliath, which centers on a down-and-out lawyer who takes on a corrupt legal system where truth has become a commodity and the scales of justice have never been more heavily weighed toward the rich and powerful. Debuting in 2016, Goliath quickly became the most binged show in Amazon's history and earned a Golden Globe for the show's star Billy Bob Thornton. Now he returns with a new case in the second season of Goliath, available on Amazon June 15th, along with some new additions to the cast, including Mark Duplass, Morris Chestnut, Hakeem Rasha, Anna de la Guerra, and Lou Diamond Phillips. And today, Billy Bob Thornton joins me on the podcast to talk about the new Goliath he's up against in Season 2 and why his character is giving away money like it's going out of style in an ongoing quest for redemption. He reveals why he's so attracted to outsider roles, what he found particularly appealing about playing an attorney, and how the show's creators, David E. Kelley and Jonathan Shapiro, both former attorneys, helped him prepare for the courtroom. He talks about some of his own favorite movie lawyers and his love of classic noir and Hitchcock films, why he says the independent film boom that allowed him to make a movie like Sling Blade is dead, and how television has come a long, long way from his early days on the 90s sitcom Evening Shade. In fact, he says for an artist like himself, television is where all the interesting stuff is happening these days, and if and when this Oscar winner finally decides to return to writing and directing, he'd be more inclined to do a television miniseries than another movie for the big screen. Then after the break, I'll talk with Mark Duplass about being one half of the acclaimed filmmaking duo, the Duplass brothers, their early years making bad remakes of horror films like The Blob, how they managed to successfully mix business and family, and why it took a long while for them to learn to, as they say, individuate and pursue individual opportunities like Mark's role in the new season of Goliath. Mark shares his excitement at finally getting to play a bad guy on Goliath and how his character, a rich, well-connected developer, wants to give LA's notoriously boring skyline a facelift. He discusses what it's like to be an actor on another director's set, using his success to showcase the next generation of filmmakers, and producing the crazy successful and just plain crazy docuseries Wild Wild Country. Coming up with Billy Bob Thornton and Mark Duplass in just a moment. Amazon's top binged series Goliath is returning for a second season, and Billy Bob Thornton is returning with it as the bedraggled lawyer Billy McBride, and I've got him with me today. Billy, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Season 1 of Goliath wrapped up pretty neatly as its own standalone narrative, but you were one of the people, along with many fans, who were saying there ought to be a Season 2. What did you want to explore in the second season of Goliath?
Well, since, like you said, the first season was very much a contained unit. I mean, it had a beginning, middle, and an end. That was actually the way they'd always intended to do it, you know, and with the idea that there might be more seasons. But it was always planned that if there are other seasons, to make them their own story too. Mm-hmm. So it would never be anything that drug the last case over into the next one or anything like that. And once you get into something like this, and you're playing a character like this that I love, you kind of become them. And I'm kind of close to the characters to start with.
Yeah.
So it was really Everybody loved it. It was successful. We, brought home a trophy or two, and so I think people really got into it and didn't want it to end. And so we were pretty sure we were going to do a season 2, even when we were shooting season 1. Season 3 is a little more questionable. I mean, it hasn't. Yeah. We don't know because this one hasn't come out yet. But so we don't have an official green light. But their intention is to do a 3rd season. We'll just see if scripts work out okay and all that. But it's just a great way to have that independent film heyday again, where you're actually. It feels like you're doing an independent film over a long period of time, which is what's appealing to me about it.
Yeah, well, you did your share of TV in the early 90s with Evening Shade and other projects before you hit it big with Sling Blade and everything that followed. That was sort of in the days when movie stars didn't go back to TV. And,
Right.
Agents would say, if you do TV, then that's going to knock $1 million off your quote.
Right.
Were you aware that TV was doing all this interesting stuff now, or were you still a little bit reluctant when you started doing Fargo and now Goliath?
I was reluctant, yes, at the beginning before Fargo, but once I read it, I thought, I've got to do this. And I was a little late to the party, so I wasn't aware that TV was as hip as it is, because it's not traditional TV. I mean, obviously, the major networks, in regular TV, they're still, even though they have some great stuff too, but it's still, in essence, like it was when I was coming up. And, and they did tell film actors, I'm not sure about TV, So I was one of those guys who said, I don't want to do TV. And then I found out that TV is hip. And not only that, it feels so much like, I said, doing, movies, that this is the place where actors want to be now, because the major studios are doing, mostly event movies these days, and the independent film business is kind of not around anymore. So this is kind of the place to do it. So we're doing some really interesting things in this whole world of your Amazons and HBOs and all these things. It's really it feels like a new. It's an invigorating thing, I believe, for actors and directors and everybody, to have this feeling again.
If you were to write and direct again, do you think you'd probably be more inclined to go the TV route than independent film now?
I think I would be, yes. Mm-hmm. I think I would be more inclined to do a movie for a movie or a miniseries for like an Amazon or something than I would be to do another film, because I think, I never had great success as a film writer and director anyway, other than Sling Blade. And, I wrote a couple movies that did okay, but as a director, I think the time for me to be a director was back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And since the TV thing feels like the 90s, maybe that's a possibility.
Yeah. Season 2 is just terrific. Is it harder to play the underdog when your character just came off of a high-profile victory and won a $100 million verdict?
Well, actually, it was one of the things that really made me love the second season, the one that's upcoming here, was the fact that he's who he is no matter what. The money doesn't really change his life that much. He's a creature of habit, and he's a guy who, so he gets more money so he could go to the fanciest restaurants if he wanted, but he likes Shay J. It's where he wants to go. He doesn't go to Shay J because he has to. He goes there because he likes it. And sometimes when you have demons and you have certain darkness or an agoraphobia or whatever it is, these places are comfort to you, and so I completely understood that part of it, and it wasn't really hard to play. I relished it, actually.
Season 1, of course, was all about you trying to find redemption, and I kind of came out of season 1 thinking that you had found that once you had won. it doesn't seem like your character feels very redeemed.
There's some people who are, well, I'll put it this way. I know this is kind of an odd reference, but about this show, but I knew or know Otis Redding's family pretty well because I wrote a script on Otis Redding once, years and years ago. It was it never got made. But Otis's wife, Zelma, she said to me, Otis had a speeding spirit. Everything he did, he always thought that he had to get on to the next one. And she said, I don't know if it's because he somehow felt he didn't have much time, which he didn't, or something. But as an actor, I never feel redemption because every time I do something, whether it's a success or not, I've got to do another one. I've got to. It's like I can't rest on this. Rest on your laurels, as they say. And I think Billy McBride is the same kind of dude. He's not that far from me in my regular life. He's just a guy that feels like, if another case comes along that he feels is worth it, he's got to do it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is to see this guy who doesn't necessarily play by the rules in a system that's entirely dependent upon working and operating within the rules.
Right.
You seem to like playing those kind of characters that don't necessarily adhere to the social norms.
Yes, absolutely, because I think there are certain social norms that are okay, and I think there are others that aren't. And I have my personal feelings about justice and fairness versus the law. How do you marry those things? I think the law is a necessary thing, and I love the law, and I believe in the law. I think we need rules, but it's not always fair. Mm-hmm. And that's what Billy McBride thinks. He thinks that justice and fairness don't always match up with what the law says. And so I think maybe that's why he keeps going. He's trying to find a way to where both of those things make sense together,
And as an actor, are you attracted to the theatricality of playing a lawyer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lawyer is a tailor-made part for an actor because, lawyers are actors in a way.
Sure.
They're trying to sell it to a jury. Mm-hmm. You're trying to sell it to an audience. So I think they are very, very similar in some ways. It's like, there's also this sort of history with movies and lawyers that, obviously To Kill a Mockingbird and The Verdict and things like that.
Yeah.
But the one, was it Inherit the Wind? It's the one with Frederick March and Spencer Tracy. It was about the Bible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. About the Scopes Monkey trial.
Right. The Scopes Monkey trial. Yeah. I mean, stuff like that. That's organic drama right there. I mean, that's it's all, everything a movie's supposed to be. Those law movies have it, just like Westerns did. Westerns were fables that were just tailor-made for audiences.
Yeah, and it's perfectly set up for the kind of underdog story that you tell in season one and now in season two.
Right.
I know that when you did Pushing 10, you studied how air traffic controllers operate. Did you do a lot of similar research for playing an attorney?
Well, excuse me. We had the great fortune of having lawyers who created the show.
Well, yeah, David E. Kelly.
Yeah, David Kelly went to law
Shapiro.
school, and Jonathan Shapiro is a lawyer. So, they were close by. I mean, and Shapiro was on the set every day. And so if I had a question, he was right there. I mean, I didn't have to go down to USC or something and, go to law school for 6 weeks or whatever. And also having just studied them over the years, got a couple of friends who are attorneys, stuff like that. You just know how that works. And I just wanted to make sure I didn't do stuff that, generally on network TV that they used to do in law shows, which is just like
surprise witnesses and stuff.
Yeah, and all that stuff. Like one of the things that I didn't want to do because I knew that from talking to lawyers was the fact that, you don't go up to a witness in their chair on that stand and like circle around them and poke your finger at them and throw books at them and stuff like that. You don't do that kind of stuff. It's not cool. As a matter of fact, these days they generally stay back at their table or at the podium, you know, unless they're giving a closing or opening argument.
Yeah. Well, for whatever it's worth, my fiance is an attorney, although she's an attorney for kind of the bad guys in your show, I think, one of these big corporate law firms. But she said it's pretty damn accurate. So
good.
You get it down pretty good, I think.
Good.
And you know, also this season seems to be more personal for you because it's not a stranger approaching you about a client.
Right.
It's your bartender or the owner of your favorite bar. I mean, for your character, it doesn't get more personal than that, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, the guy that takes me home at night when I'm too drunk to move. Yeah, you gotta do something about his case. But and yeah, that was really great to have Lou Diamond there. You know.
Oh yeah,
he's such a terrific guy and such a terrific actor. You know, I was so happy that he was involved in this, and I mean, all the actors, just really wonderful people to work with. Yeah.
Well, you know, I thought that the first season had a lot of elements maybe reminiscent of Chinatown because, you know, you play part lawyer, kind of part private investigator out of necessity. You have all these great locations in L.A., little guy fighting the powerful machine. As a cinemaphile yourself, what would you liken season 2 to?
I would say that season 2 has certain, you know, the basic elements of the first season, but I would say, if anything, one of the major differences is there's not as much courtroom this time. There's probably more of the detective.
Yeah, and more of L.A.
It's more of L.A., and I'm out in the field a lot more in this one, and it gets increasingly more like that toward the last 2 or 3 episodes. But yeah, this one gets real close to the Chinatown-like thing, and I would say even more noirish, you know, and it's in color,
Hitchcock.
but in Hitchcock, it seems like it's in color, but it seems like it's in black and white this season.
Yeah, it feels like it's in black and white, definitely.
And so,
I get it.
and the Hitchcock idea, I mean, there are moments when this character almost seems like the Jimmy Stewart character in Vertigo a bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the Jimmy Stewart character in Rear Window, if he could walk.
Yeah, exactly. I could totally see that.
Right. So yeah, and I think particularly episode 8 has a very Hitchcockian feeling to it. You know.
Yeah, it's just terrific, and it's great to have you back in season 2 of Goliath. Billy Bob Thornton, thanks so much for talking with me.
Well, thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, and then in the second half, I'll talk with Mark Duplass about getting to play a bad guy in season 2 of Goliath, working with his brother Jay as one half of the successful filmmaking duo the Duplass brothers, and how Goliath fits into their plan to, quote, individuate, when we return in just a minute. Lawyers are expensive, but not with Legal Shield. Legal Shield is changing the industry, offering affordable access to an entire law firm at a low monthly rate. Legal Shield law firms have over 20 years' experience in many areas of law. From estate planning to traffic violations, Legal Shield can assist with a variety of legal problems. They can even help with finance issues, such as tax concerns and debt collection, or offer guidance for things like a dispute between a tenant and landlord. When you have a legal question or an issue, simply call your law firm and a lawyer will return your call within 8 business hours. They're even available 24/7 for covered emergency situations. With the Legal Shield mobile app, you can call your law firm at the touch of a button, access legal forms, and upload your speeding ticket for review. Legal Shield makes receiving legal assistance easy and affordable. Don't worry about life's unforeseen troubles. Put a law firm in your corner. Visit LegalShield.com for more information and get the peace of mind you deserve today. And now, back to the podcast. Coming off the heels of some very recent successes, including Wild Wild Country for Netflix and Room 104 for HBO, the multi-talented actor and filmmaker Mark Duplass now joins the cast of Goliath for Season 2. Mark, How the hell do you find the time?
Well, I think it looks like we do more than we actually do.
Yeah.
We have a company of about 10 people who help us out. That's part of it. And, in the case of, say, Wild Wild Country, I work with really talented filmmakers who know what they're doing. So I'm not there editing every day with them. I'm supporting them and helping them do their thing. And in the case of Room 104, I write half of those scripts, but I hire really talented directors to direct them, and I let them go with it. So, the long and the short of it is that delegation is a big part of it. And in the case of, Goliath season 2, I shouldn't have taken this role because I didn't have time for it, but it's a chance to play a bad guy, and it's a chance to work with Billy Bob Thornton, and so I kind of had to say yes.
Who could possibly pass that up?
Yeah.
And by the way, I enjoyed you and Jay's book, Like
Thank
Brothers,
you for reading it.
which just came out, just
it
a month
came
ago
out
or
like
something
a
like that?
couple of weeks ago, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you guys do it. Me and my brother, we couldn't agree on a Mother's Day gift, much less make a movie together.
Yeah,
That's
I think
remarkable.
that really is one of the main reasons we wrote the book, is because I've heard that so many times. And I think that, there's a lot of reasons, but I think the core of our collaboration is that we grew up in the suburbs of New Orleans, and we felt, and this is all false modesty aside, painfully average in terms of our intelligence, our athletic ability, our looks, our whatever. We just felt like normal people, and if we wanted to try to become successful artists, that we were going to have to lock arms and lock souls and have the strength of the two of us, and put aside all the little squabbles and all the little problems to have any sort of a chance of making it.
Yeah, I mean, how do you guys divide up your duties on a project? How do you make these decisions without getting at each other's throats?
It's easier now because we're more grown up, we're more emotionally aware, we know what our strengths are a little bit more. It was harder in our 20s, but at the same time, we grew up in this way of making movies that didn't follow any of the rules. There were less divisions of labor. We would just pick up our parents' camera and just do it. It was like an arts and crafts project for an 8-year-old kid. So as we've gotten older, I think that we realize, okay, there are certain strengths that we have. I tend to be better at sort of that first vomit draft of a script and getting that thing out onto paper. Jay's a really good closer. He's like, he can take the minutia of a project and tweak it until it becomes great, which I don't know how to do. And then sometimes it's as simple as we walk in to a set of, say, Togetherness, and we look at each other in the morning, and one of us is looking more anxious, depressed, and tired than the other one, and we don't have to say anything, and that's where we develop kind of what we call president and vice president mode, where someone just sort of becomes the leader at that moment, and the other person lays back a little bit. And there's power in that too, because while someone is charging forward, leading the troops, they're getting 80% of it done, but that person who's laying back is seeing things from a 30,000-foot view that the leader inevitably misses. Mm-hmm. And so there's a value in that.
Yeah, what was it like growing up in New Orleans? Is that a pretty good place for fostering creativity in two young boys?
It sounds like it, but we were in the suburbs, kind of removed. So
Metairie, right?
Yeah, Metairie. We could have been in Ohio, and as we got older, we started to realize, yes, there's this cool stuff 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
But our collective experiences, we're watching HBO, we're seeing these movies, we love them, we don't know who makes them or how they get made. And we felt intensely removed from an artistic community. We were just bored suburban kids. And it wasn't until we moved to Austin and really were able to see firsthand guys like Richard Linklater and Robert Rodriguez making movies on their own with their friends that we started to realize, like, maybe this is possible. Maybe we might have something to offer, even though we don't wear a beret and smoke a long cigarette, and Linklater in particular, seeing him in bad jeans and bad t-shirts and old sneakers and hearing him talk in his frankly rather uneloquent normal guy way made me feel like, oh, I think I have enough
So he was one of your early inspirations, Linkletter.
Yeah.
I know the Coen brothers were also big
They were
inspirations.
huge inspirations, but ultimately, idols that we couldn't live up to. I think those guys are so hyper intelligent, and they are so unbelievably focused in their ability to exact a pre-existing vision and get it onto the screen. We try to do that, and we failed miserably. We're not good at that. And I think that's one of the mistakes we made growing up as artists, was trying to really emulate the kinds of art that we liked watching, as opposed to trying to figure out what we uniquely had to offer, which, as much as I am a fan of the Coen brothers, what I can do well is wildly different than what they do.
Are you comfortable with the realization that you guys have kind of finally built your own brand?
I am comfortable with it. I have no, how do I say it? I have survivor's guilt in that we try to mentor young filmmakers so that they don't suffer as much as we did on the way up, But I have no delusions about the fact that I have gotten farther and I am more successful than I ever thought I could possibly be. And I want to own that and not be falsely modest about the fact that, well, I'm not really that popular. I'm still just a normal, I can't believe we got this far. And I want to try to enjoy it as much as I can.
Yeah, I mean, here you are in Amazon's #1 series. Do you ever look back at when you and your brother were shooting homemade remakes of The Blob and just wonder, how the hell did I get to this point? In a good way.
On a Monday, I might feel that way. And then on a Tuesday, I wake up and I feel all the aches and pains in my neck and shoulders. And I look at the gray in my beard and the dark circles under my eyes. And I remind myself that I destroyed myself for 20 years, day and night, toiling, failing, reworking in order to get here.
Yeah.
And then I think, that's how I got here, because I earned those miles. But then on Wednesday, I wake up and I go, oh my God, how did I get here? So it's very bipolar.
It sounds like there's a little bit of you that's kind of like, maybe we romanticize the struggling artist too much and the struggle too much.
I think that it's not that we romanticized it. It's that we just couldn't. It took us a long time to discover who we were, We didn't have any mentors. We didn't have anybody telling us and guiding us. We just had to fail over and over and over again, just constantly climbing up a mountain and tumbling down and climbing up. And so if I see someone now who I think is really gifted or interesting, and I can help them avoid some of the, I guess what I would call the unnecessary pitfalls, because some of them are necessary, I would say that's doing the Lord's work.
Now, when you have such a compatible working relationship with Jay over, 2 decades now, does it make it harder when one of you branches out individually to collaborate with other people on a project like Goliath?
So I think that in our 20s, we were really lockstep together, writing and directing movies. We were an impenetrable team. And that was really great because we needed each other to climb that mountain. But then I think that once we kind of got to the top of that mountain, we realized that we probably needed to individuate a little bit and figure out who we were. It still happens to me. I walk into a party and they're like, hey, how's it going? Where's Jay? And it's like, well, sometimes we do things not together, and we have to learn how to do that. And so I think Jay being on Transparent, and me being in things like The League or Goliath, and even movies like Blue Jay that I make under our company banner, but are still a little bit more my pet project. They're very healthy things for us. Jay and I call them sort of our affairs on our marriage. And it's good for us. And I think that if anything, it brings us back together in a way that makes that bond stronger, because we've learned other things, or we've missed each other, or things like that.
So when, say, Jay takes Transparent, or you decide to take a part on Goliath, the other brother isn't like, oh, okay, you're going to do something by yourself, huh?
Is
there a part for me?
It's 100. It's not. Is there a part for me? But it's 100%. This is what the conversation feels like. I'm so proud of you. I love you. I hope you get everything you want out of this. I hope you don't fall too deeply in love with those people and like them more than you like me and leave me in the dust. And it's, like any close relationship, you want the best for them, but you don't want them to be too happy without you, because
Yeah.
then that negates your presence in that relationship.
Yeah, and I know that you and your brother came up on movies like The Karate Kid and Rocky, these inspirational, come from behind kind of movies. Goliath fits kind of nicely into that genre as an underdog, maybe without the schmaltz, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really good a good analogy. I mean, I think that one thing that I responded to in the first season of Goliath is that you know, Billy Bob Thornton as a person is such a seeker of honesty and truth, and it really comes through in the character of Billy McBride. And I think that this storyline that is essentially, you know, it's a kind of a crime thriller storyline, but it has much more of an interpersonal interest than a lot of those television shows normally do, which is what brought my attention towards it. Because, you know, quite frankly, like I'm not really going to show up for just an average crime procedural show. It's just not my thing. But when it has that combined with a lot of these really cool interpersonal storylines, I was like, oh, that sounds cool.
So often you're either the person who actually created a project that you're in, or you're at the very least on the ground floor of a project, whether it's The League, Togetherness, even the Mindy project. I think you came in pretty early in the first season.
Yeah.
Does it feel like a different vibe when you're stepping into the second season of a show that's fully formed and already wildly successful like Goliath?
It does feel different, but in a great way for someone like me, because I don't need to be on the ground floor of something to feel good about myself or to feel like I can have a worthy contribution to it, because I've done that so many times. And quite frankly, I'm not looking for more of that. That's more responsibility and more pressure. I've got plenty of that in my life. To be able to be a small part of Goliath like I was, that already has its foundation built, that they do that show better than I ever possibly could, is actually not only relieving, but it's joyful for me, because I can come in and say, all right, you guys are doing your thing. I'll try to add these 2 or 3 things to sprinkle on top of your cake, but you guys got the cake and you know what you're doing. That actually, you know, I guess the way I always equate it is like, that's like being the fun uncle who shows up at the birthday party and has a good time and leaves, as
you don't
opposed
have
to
the responsibility.
being the parent. And that's what I am for most of my projects, is I'm the parent. And that's quite frankly rewarding and totally exhausting.
Now, tell us a little bit about your character in season 2.
So I play a guy named Tom Wyatt, who is one of these sort of gazillionaire real estate developers in the city of Los Angeles. And he is personally funding the political campaign of a woman named Marisol Silva, who is running for mayor of Los Angeles. And while he likes her politics, I think he also wants to be able to have some influence over her so he can do what he wants to do to the LA skyline with his buildings. And that is all well and good, and a normal conflict that you might find in an average city. But Tom Wyatt is not normal. He is a wildly unhinged person. I think there's a level of sociopathy going on there that he doesn't quite understand yet. There are some deep, strange childhood trauma wounds that he is just starting to scratch the surface of. So what made it so exciting for me is to play someone who is in a position of serious civic power on the outside, while crumbling on the inside and capable of anything.
Yeah, it kind of seems relevant to today.
It does seem a little relevant
It reminds
to
me
today.
of someone.
Yes.
You know, I have to say on some level, I'm kind of rooting for your guy, because God knows LA probably has the most boring skyline of any major city in the world.
I like that. It's a good approach. Yeah.
Well, you know, of course, people who aren't from LA will find this section really boring, but I just learned, because I guess now they've opened that up where they can have interesting buildings downtown.
Sure.
But for the longest time, if you look at the downtown skyline, all the buildings are flat, because there was something in the building code that said that every building above a certain height had to have a flat roof that could have a helipad.
Right.
For, like, I guess an emergency helicopter or something like that.
Well, probably for the rich people, the rich 8 people who run the city, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I guess they just scrapped that recently. So now you actually have like the Korean Air building that just came up that doesn't have a flat roof. We actually have interesting skylines coming about. And there is a lot of LA in season 2. There was a lot in season 1. There's even more in season 2, which is fun. I love being able to watch a show and see landmarks that I know, or continuity check a show and say, hey, he just walked into the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, but that interior is from the LA Athletic Club or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that, for a show like Goliath, where, honestly, most of the people who are watching the show are not in Los Angeles. They're really spread around the country. I was surprised how wildly popular the show is in the middle of the country. A lot of them have basically one experience of Los Angeles, and it is sort of centered around Hollywood. And this thing moves around quite a bit, and in particular some of these areas of downtown, which has been such a strange historical development. This season, when I was hearing it pitched to me when I came aboard, it sounded a lot like Chinatown. I remembered feeling like this feels, like an old noir in that way, and you get to learn some of that stuff about it through the show. It's cool.
Yeah, I was thinking Chinatown when I was watching it, actually.
Yeah, and you're not really sure who is the bad person. Are there shades of these things? The Goliath in season 2 is not as readily identifiable as some people might think.
Now, I had Bob Balaban on the other day, and he's like yourself as an actor-director, and he said that every time he acts in a film, he loves to shadow the director. As a filmmaker, do you find yourself trying to learn something or pick up something from the directors?
Sometimes I get there, and after a day, I'm like, I don't need to shadow this person. I'm good. As terms of the set of Goliath, for me, Larry Trilling, who's our showrunner, was really fascinating to sort of get to know better. He and I were friendly before I started the show. But he's a guy who really, he strikes with his instinct, and he strikes fast, and he moves on, and he creates a nice day for everybody, where a lot of times we shoot before the 12 hours are up, we wrap, and a lot of directors hem and haw about what it is that they want. And when he builds a scene, he comes in and he just looks around and he says, okay, let's do it in this, and this shot. And he doesn't look back, and he goes. And I really like that approach.
There's a lot to be said for letting your actors and your crew go home early. Yeah, maybe it gets you a better product the next day. I
am a huge believer in the humanity of running a set. We talk a lot about that in our book, about how a key ingredient of collaboration is knowing who you're with and validating them and giving them the things they need. And, when we shoot Room 104, our series for HBO, we wrap early almost every day. And everybody says, oh, that's so nice of you to do that. You're nice to people. And that, yes, that's part of it. But I believe over the long term, when you do that, you build up people's stamina and their equity and their joy for the show, and they bring you better energy. And it actually, I think it does make a better product in the long run.
Yeah, that should be rule number 2 behind good craft services, I think, or good catering.
Yes. And, some people just run a set where they think, well, we've got 12 hours to shoot. We've already paid for it. Use every minute. Yeah. And I don't believe in that.
Well, before we go, any word on a sequel to Wild Wild Country, or have we pretty much wrapped that story
I mean,
up?
that story itself is certainly wrapped, There's, as you might imagine, quite a lot of interest from people who want to make a narrative out of it, But I look at that, and as I do with a lot of documentaries, if there's a documentary subject that's interesting and the documentary wasn't that well made, I think it's worth remaking. But Chap and Mac Way, who directed Wild Wild Country for us, I think they really maximized that. So I'm not that interested in making a narrative out of that. I would rather go find something else.
Well, I'm sure in a week and a half you'll have something amazing on TV or in the movie theaters. So, yeah, I'm amazed at everything you've accomplished. And season 2 is all the better for your presence. Mark Duplass, thanks
man.
For sitting down with me.
Appreciate it. It was fun.
Thanks again to Billy Bob Thornton and Mark Duplass for coming on the podcast. Season 2 of Goliath is available on Amazon beginning Friday, June 15th. For more information, visit Amazon.com and search Goliath. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Kickass News on iTunes and leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook or on Twitter at @KickassNewsPod. And as always, I welcome your comments, questions, and ideas at comments@kickassnews.com. I'm Ben Mathis, and thanks for listening to Kickass News. Kickass News is a trademark of Mathis Entertainment, Inc.